The track exists, and I think I'm a pretty big fan of it. Valtteri Bottas takes his 356th power unit for 2021. Martin Brundle sings full song with a full lap run through as Max Verstappen goes around the track. But then Max Verstappen puts it into the wall on what was probably the best qualifying lap of the season. G'day there. My name is James Baldwin, and welcome to another episode of Lakeside Drive's F1 podcast. In this episode, we pre-drink ahead of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, where you can't drink. And I'm joined by my friends and yours. Tommy T, g'day, mate.
Good.
Good.
Well.
Good. And Campy, hello, mate.
Hello, gentlemen. How are you?
Doing very well. Thank you. Great to have your company listening to us. My apologies for not having any episode last week. We did have a chat with Josh. Revel, unfortunately, was pushed later into the week, and due to some technical issues, we're still not having that finalised, but that'll come out in a couple of weeks' time, so you can look forward to that chat.
It's a good chat.
But lads, let's start with a bit of sadder news ahead of the Grand Prix weekend, and that of the passing of Frank Williams. Campy, we'll start with you first. All the teams are running the original Frank Williams logo that he had on the car when he was first team principal before he started Williams. Of course, he was a team principal of two teams. Williams, the second most successful team in Formula One still. It's a massive hole that he's left in the sport.
Yeah, absolutely. I think his legacy has been firmly cemented for a long time. He grew up in that era. Could we ever see another Frank Williams ever again? Probably not, the way the sport's structured and the technology and the money these days. He really came into the sport just with a real passion, built his own cars, started his own teams and own engines, and to be the second most successful team in F1 history is no mean feat. So, look, it's a shame. It's sad, but he's, thoughts and prayers are with the Williams family at the moment. It's obviously a big loss, and just to go with a few of the big losses we've had in the last 2 or 3 years as well. Very sad for the sport, but we will continue to race and keep moving on. And I think the way the drivers and the teams publicly have made statements about what Frank Williams has done has been excellent. I think it's one of the better campaigns they've run this year. Not that it's a campaign, but I think it's really genuine and from the heart, and that's really, the authenticity behind it is what we want to see from the sport at all times. And I think everyone's pretty shattered, but as I said, thoughts go out to Claire Williams and her family, and we hope to see you on the grid at some stage again.
Tommy T, of course, not only did Frank Williams cause a massive positive change for Formula One, alongside people like Patrick Head. Of course, Patrick Head did an amazing job in getting incredible people into Williams, like Adrian Newey, of course, and Australia's Sam Michael. But it is, as Campy just mentioned there, an incredible moment where a competitor is celebrated up and down the field, and unequivocally everyone is showing full support.
Yeah, and I think it's because of the impact that he had over so many years. It'd be near on half a century of his impact in the sport. And just kind of, I suppose, the way he fostered young talent, and even talent not in necessarily the driving seat, but also behind the scenes and all those kind of things. So many people can trace back their first start to somewhere like Williams and anything that Frank had to do with the sport, and just making it a career for so many people that it otherwise wouldn't have been. Motorsport is a tough industry, as we know, and to pave the way for so many others now is just an incredible feat that he's done. And he kind of did it in like a very selfless way, it seemed. It was never about so much him and his success, but just group success and everyone wanting to do better and kind of grow Formula One as a whole.
And of course, he put two Australians in his cars over the years, that of Mark Webber and Alan Jones, of course. But I think if you followed Formula One and if you had a hero in Formula One, the likelihood of them driving for Williams was incredibly high. Of course, Nigel Mansell, world champion. Damon Hill, of course, world champion, although maybe he should have just stayed driving rather than speaking. Keke Rosberg, for example. Nelson Piquet, Alain Prost. They just keep Jacques Villeneuve. It just keeps going and going and going. If you go and look, Juan Pablo Montoya as well, go and look at just the Wikipedia page of how Williams drivers. It is a lengthy list, and so many names, of course, contemporary names and historical names that are amazing. So for him to be in the sport for this long was epic. And 50 years of being a team principal he celebrated in 2019. Of course, the team has moved on and people have had their thoughts about what Claire was like one way or another. But as Campy said very eloquently last year, she put the team in a great position for Dalton Capital to take over. Of course, the name has been kept. Now that's fully cemented, even if it wasn't before. But it is good news for the sport that, that Williams legacy continues. Very sad, of course. Well, let's keep moving on. A slightly more positive news, not for Richard Verschoor in MP Motorsport and Formula 2, but for Jack Doohan. He does be doing things, Campy. It looks like there was some funding issues for Richard, which has caused massive rifts in the paddock, of course, but you need a couple of $1 million to go racing in Formula 2. It's not a cheap sport. Most of those drivers are paying for themselves to be there, or at least with sponsorship along the way. But for Jack Doohan, it was a good thing for him. He's finished his Formula 3 season in a really much better place than he was last year. And, of course, all eyes for him now rest on F2 for 2022 as well.
Yeah, look, qualified in 16th, so not the greatest qualifying, not anything to jump up and down about. But, first time in the car, really, first outing on track. Excellent job he did in the two sprint races we've had so far. I think the first one he climbed up to 11th and finished 5th in the second one. So he made up, 6 or 7 positions in both races, which is good for Jack on debut. It's what we want to see from him. I was unsure about how he'd go in F2, jumping up from the F3. But he was excellent, so that's all. He's making headlines, isn't he? On debut, doing things like that. That's what we want to see from our young Aussie drivers. A bit of a shame for sure. I think, funding all year and for it to run out with 2 races to go, it's a tough decision for the team and him. But at the end of the day, he was. What was the point in keeping him for those extra 2 races? Get someone in like Jack who can fill a void for next year as well. So, it's exciting for us Aussies over here having 2 very capable drivers in F2 at the moment. So, see how we go.
Let's keep talking about F2. Tommy T, Oscar Piastri, of course, on song to take this championship for 2021, isn't he?
Yeah, he is so young, but looks like a veteran out there. He's making very smart decisions.
Yep.
He had a 5-second penalty ahead with Daruvula, so he didn't have to overtake him on track at all. He could have just sat behind within that and taken the podium, but he wanted to clear him, and he did it in a spectacular way going into turn 1 and 2 and outbraked him, just shocked Daruvula, and he's just such a mature driver. It's bizarre to see. He reminds you of someone like when we talk about Kimi or Alonso with just those kind of moves that no one really expects, but they're just so classy and clean. Like there's no, sporadic kind of movement. He's just such a clean driver and very excited to see what he does. He's got so much patience and he's qualified on pole the last four outings. So he's on an absolute purple patch of form at the moment. So very excited to see what he does with some practice sessions next year.
Yeah, the Iceman, right?
Yeah, he does. He seems to be pretty chill, pretty quiet in comparison to a lot of others. But, he gets it done. His consistency is there. He might not always be the fastest over one lap, but he's certainly there to take the positions where he needs to and pick up the pieces. The guy is an absolute rocket ship. Of course, coming from Melbourne as well, there's a bit more of that happiness from 3 of us point of view, other than the west of the country. But there you go. It's good for him. The other bit of news I want to talk about before we get into F1 is that Cyril finally got his tattoo. It's the top half of the Renault logo with a honey badger going across the left-hand side. Good bit of content by DR, has to be said. But Tommy T, I'm not sure if you watched it, but it was a bit sad from Cyril's point of view, because the question was put to him by expert interviewer Daniel Ricciardo and said, well, do you miss the F1 paddock then? Because of course I bloody do. I miss it every day. I don't even really watch it anymore because it's a bit emotional for me.
Because I'm not there anymore.
And we miss him too, actually, in retrospect, because whilst the banter is going on with Toto and Karen, we've quickly forgotten the banter that Cyril brought to Karen last year as well, didn't we, Tommy?
Yeah, he was good. I think it's because he was such an emotional guy and he was just honest. He wasn't playing games as much, Cyril. He was just like being raw. And we missed that. That was nice. And we haven't seen any of like Gunter. We haven't seen any of these other kind of characters who we want to see raw emotion from rather than just these kind of calculated reactions. Like seeing 2 weeks ago with Toto pointing at the camera, that was about as raw as we've ever seen him.
Yes.
And that was epic.
Yeah,
that's going to live on for a while, isn't it, that image? But yeah, we do miss Cyril. He was a great character to have around. He's very good at his job, but also was great content.
Yes,
so
which is the main thing for us.
Did Renault have a better year last year than Alpine did this year?
Well,
a race win.
Yeah, race. But if you take the race win out of it, and you look at DR's podium positions,
he was consistently in that 5th, 4th kind of range, wasn't he?
Yeah, I would say. Although the Alpine looks great this weekend, can I just say with the addition of the green on the very back?
Oh, I disagree. I think it looks like they've left Floater's paint on it and just not cleaned it off again.
Yes. Well, anyway, look, I think Renault. Yeah. I mean, they don't even have a team principal yet. I still don't know who the Alpine team principal is.
Choose one. Like I'm
pretty sure they've Suzuki got guy.
No, mate. That's one person. They've got like a spinning wheel, and they go, well, who's going to be this weekend? And they spin the wheel. They go to the casino, and then they go, right, it's going to be him. And then this other random guy comes out. Who knows?
You give it back on Tuesday.
That is not good for an organisation. I love Cyril. I think he's been quality.
Yeah.
And where he had that team last year, I think it was excellent. I mean, the
progression was there.
You can't not lose a guy like Daniel Ricciardo and start asking questions about your organisation, because Danny was pretty quick to get out of there, if we're honest. But there's a lot of side to Formula One. I mean, Danny Rick's obviously got a very good relationship, a working relationship with him that extends out of the paddock too. You look how he interacts still with Christian Horner and some of the Red Bull guys at times, and I mean he's a real well respected and liked guy. I think it says more about Danny Rick's character and how he goes about it off track more than anything. But I think it was good from Cyril to honour the process and the bet, and I mean they probably had lunch before it and caught up as well, which is a bit of a shame. And he's probably someone that's probably a really good sounding board for Danny Rick. That's outside of the sport now, he can bounce ideas off and shoot the shit with, I suppose, and get some quality advice as well. So.
And he's absolutely, as I think, Tommy, you said, very passionate in a good way. Cyril, there is no politicky game playing with him. It is, I want to win. I want to be on the podium.
It's just raw.
Anyway, that was great to see. A little bit sad, but who knows? Otmar might be going to Alpine as the team principal for next year. That sort of disappeared very quickly, but it always, Formula One, you never know. Stuff like that comes back. Let's talk about practice. Well, firstly, let's actually just talk about the circuit itself. It exists, which I didn't think on Wednesday that it would.
Surprise.
But Tommy T, let's get your initial thoughts of the Jeddah circuit.
It looks very fun. Like, it would be fun to drive. I don't know what it'd be like to be a spectator there because it's so long. I don't know if you're going to get to see much, unless you could get really high and see both sides of the track, I guess. But I think it'd be great to go to. That looks like a really fun city as well, from the little bits that we've seen, snippets, Ted wandering around and kind of explaining a bit. But so far, the track's epic. I'm still skeptical because we haven't seen any racing. We've seen some F2, but that's never really an indicator, I don't think, of what F1's going to be like. So I'll hold my breath, I guess, and see what it's actually like as a racetrack.
Campy, when it comes to new racetracks, if we cast our mind back to Azerbaijan, when that was first a thing, firstly, they kept finding nuts and bolts on the ground. So I'm glad that hasn't been the case here with Jeddah, that hopefully a couple of street sweepers have gone through. Secondly, the F2 race was so ridiculous that the F1 race afterwards was very tame because the drivers just didn't want to push the limits. And in fact, the F1 race the following year was even better because they found out where the limits were. So there's potential for that to happen, Tommy T, if it was, go ridiculous. But I don't think, at least looking at what's happened for Formula 2 so far, I don't think there's been any ridiculousness. There's sort of gone, okay, well, there's some passing happening here and here, no worries. And if you go off the track, this is how you get back on safely, the rest of it. But for the overarching big thing, and we'll talk about what happened in practice with Mazepin and Hamilton as well, the biggest thing, Campy, is that 323, I think, kilometers an hour is what I saw Max Verstappen get up to in qualifying. And there are so many blind corners, of course.
Yep.
You know, the bigger issue is what happens if someone collects a barrier and then gets punted straight back onto the racing line in a blind corner. And with the jeopardy of marshals either waving the wrong flag or taking too long to wave a flag or anything else, and you're heavily relying on those safety measures, the flags, the big LED boards, and of course the driving, the steering wheel, I should say, flashing up some lights. Are you concerned about any massive accidents that we might be having tonight?
I think the worst part we've passed is qualifying. You know, Q1, when people are banking up trying to set lap times. We saw that a bit in practice too. We saw Max coming through in Q1. He had to pass about 7 or 8 people in that last, that 24 and 25. Look, I think we passed the hurdle. Do I think we'll see a bad accident tonight? Maybe not, but we will see a bad accident on this track at some stage. It's not a question of if it'll happen, it's a when. And I think, even the couple of touches and close calls we had in qualifying, and the Mazepin Hamilton thing. Look, you can just see it. There's a car going slow on the racing line. Someone's coming to it 280 k an hour, and bang, straight up the rear. It's not going to be a good look. But hey, the FIA, we've got to give them some credit. They give these tracks some safety checks and go over them, and they look at it from all different angles. And if they deem it safe enough to race, well, fair enough to them. It is a street circuit, although we've never seen a street circuit this fast, throughout, other than Baku, really. But I think it's not an if question, it's a when question. And I think when it does happen, it could be bloody scary. Let's hope we don't see it tonight, and let's hope that it doesn't ruin the championship fight between Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen tonight. I'd hate for an incident to happen and someone gets passed on track because, an incident comes out. Or one of them's taken out, and the other one gets an insurmountable lead for the next race. So that's what I'd hate to see. But I think if something bad does happen, we're going to be asking the FIA a hell of a lot of questions because everyone's sitting here going, geez, this got the potential to... Yeah, Sainz's crash in practice, that looked brutal. At least he didn't sling back onto the track like he did. But if that was a concrete wall, I'd hate to think what would happen. But anyway.
Yeah. Although it's not a street circuit, is it? Because it wasn't a street first. It's a circuit street. It'll be the streets will come after the circuit was built.
It's kind of like Albert Park, isn't it?
Yeah, everyone's going, it's a street circuit. It's not. It's a purpose-built racetrack that they've just decided to have very little runoff in the most corners ever. Yeah.
Which is what the fans want, really. Isn't it?
Which is fine, absolutely. But it's not a street circuit. It's not Singapore or even, Albert Park is probably a good... in terms of comparison, that's the one. But Singapore's actually a street circuit. So is Baku. Anyway, that's just me going. But I think, to be honest, and looking at the drivers' first impressions, like they were pretty happy with how it looked. I think it's good. I don't necessarily think it was sold all that well at the beginning of the year, and of course we know the political issues that surround Saudi Arabia. Of course, Lewis Hamilton's pointed them out. Seb Vettel is the king that we just don't deserve at the moment. Of course, he put together a FIA Women in Motorsport event with some karting for some young female drivers coming up, and he was like teaching them stuff, which again, just an absolute legend of a human being. But take that away from it and just look at the racetrack, and I think it's a very, very good addition to the calendar, honestly, because there's nothing else like it, and that's kind of the point, right? We don't want just same, to the point where I actually think this is the best commentary, at least for qualifying, I've heard all year. Brundle and Crofty were actually on it and actually excited about it. You could tell there's a massive difference. Yeah. So that's good to see as well. The issue that I spoke about just before, though, Hamilton, he's given a reprimand, and Mercedes were issued £25,000 fine for impeding Mazepin. And there was a text from Lewis apparently to Nikita to say, A, sorry, B, thank you for not yeeting into the back of me and collecting my car, because that would have been championship over. See you night, good night, basically. But the thing that I think was interesting, there was some double wave yellows at one point or another. Campy and Hamilton ignored them, and he was given a reprimand. Now, let's cast our minds back to the flag situation at Qatar, of course, with yellow flags and what happened with grid penalties there. how do you see this? Should there be some more consistency race to race, or is each weekend, and I know Tommy T, you brought this up last time, there's a mix of stewards are never the same. Is it okay that every race weekend is treated completely differently because it's a completely different circuit?
I want consistency throughout the board. Like, I want consistency. I mean, why did Max get a 5 place grid penalty and Sainz only get a 3 last week? Should Hamilton get a penalty? Yes, but they don't. I mean, it's in a practice session too, so they don't want to be seen to be playing games of the championship at the moment.
Yeah, exactly.
I think, they probably made the right decision because, imagine the fans in the get-up if Lewis was to get a penalty for that. It's something they got to look at. It's something they got to figure out. I think they're a bit more lenient because it is practice and it's a new circuit and people are still figuring it out. It's the first, we've only, at the time, they hadn't even been on the track for more than 2 hours. So, I think there's a bit of lenience that way. Do I like it? Well, we've got rules for a reason because we've seen what happens when we don't follow them, like Jules Bianchi. Tragic losses of life that, we don't want to see. And the reason we have yellow flags is to try and mitigate those extreme circumstances. So, but did Hamilton do a lot wrong? No. But, hey, be consistent from weekend to weekend. So that's what we want.
Yeah, look, I think you nailed it there. And Tommy T, I would hate anything like this to get in the way of the championship fight because it's kind of unnecessary when it comes right to the very end of the season.
It's not what we want. We don't want an asterisk, do we? I think the thing that we struggle with as well is just there's so many people who have the ability to wave a yellow or press a button or whatever. I feel like there's too many forms of yellow that it gets so confusing. There's on your steering wheel, there's actual analog flags that are still made of fabric, and then there's the boards, there's all these other things popping up. The driver's getting so confused because you're only getting one of them coming through, not all three, or this is when they're like, well, is it a real yellow? Is it a fake yellow? Did someone accidentally do this? There's too much kind of unknown there. I feel like there needs to be a bit more, overarching, this is what a yellow is. And maybe we remove the analog fabric flags and they just have a button. Every marshal has a button on the side of the track and they just whack it and it turns that to yellow. Because I sent you guys a video from F2 before and there's a guy waving a green flag while there's clearly a car in the wall for about 10 seconds while the screen is punching yellow, but he's still waving a green flag. So it goes both ways. Sometimes the analog flag's quicker than the boards and vice versa. I feel like we need one system that everyone has access to for speed and consistency and uniformity for the drivers so they know what they're expecting rather than looking for 20 different signals and messages in a bottle and I don't know, like someone yodeling or something.
Sting standing outside.
Do they get, messages on the steering wheel, on the dash?
Yeah, they're supposed to.
They get flags, yeah.
Not all the time though. This is the issue that we had with Max last time around is that the yellow was waving, but there was no steering wheel on the green board. And anyway, look, I'm pretty sure
in this age with the technology we have, it's really easy to get that right on a steering wheel.
Yeah, you would.
You'd hope.
To be able to send a message that every other thing goes blank and it just flashes with a flag so the drivers absolutely know what's happening. You know?
I think the rule still is though the analog, as you put it, the fabric flag takes precedence over everything else. Which is
even
fine.
Though that's some guy who's not
in
any way qualified and just hangs out next to a wall.
It would be interesting to understand better. Of course, this is just purely from a fan perspective. It'd be interesting to understand better exactly the process. Maybe the Melbourne Grand Prix next year we can try and get in. Maybe we can try and get Campy to wave a flag. Could possibly go wrong. But as just to understand that because I think it's
I'll
just
do better than Serena Williams.
Mate, if you're waving the checkered flag, so much has gone wrong. Jeez, you've got into the Porsche Club somehow, then F1 Paddock Club, and then you've taken someone's official lanyard and then gone, yeah, I'm DJ Campy, I'm like the real big deal down under, and they'd be like, oh, okay, sounds good to me. Puts you out there. Anyway, it'd be interesting to understand though, I think that. But you're absolutely right. All right, let's talk about qualifying because Aston Martin was worse than Williams. That's it.
Useless.
That's the story. That's the headline.
And Alpha.
They were also shocked by it, weren't they?
Seb was very shocked, Tommy T.
Yeah. Yeah, Seb had no idea. He seemed to think that they were faster. The track was getting faster as it progressed, though, and obviously different to other practice sessions, which were on during different times of the day. This was much cooler. But yeah, they were genuinely shocked, and Stroll just looked nowhere. At least Seb was kind of troubling kind of the back of that cutoff. But yeah, very disappointing from them.
Yeah, it was in the end Q1, Campy, it was pretty close between sort of 1st to 15th, and then Mazepin was about 4 seconds behind everyone else. But that sort of any kind of risk that you can take, and we saw it on Max's last lap in that first sector where it looked like he collected the wall and he didn't. He was just collecting dust because no one else had been on that part of the racetrack yet, even though, anyway, ridiculousness. But just
were the F1 cars
limits.
the 3rd and 4th fastest Astons at that track this week? I think the safety car and the medical car were doing better, to be honest.
You'd hate for that stat to actually be the thing, wouldn't you? The medical car, which is a lumbering SUV, is faster than Lance Stroll.
There's every chance.
Yeah, but I mean, for Williams though, Campy, we know that they're very concentrated on qualifying. But for a track like this, of course, you'd hope that Mercedes power unit advantage would deliver a little bit more. But again, they're running the same power unit as the Aston Martin. So what was it, do you think, that they just couldn't get it together? They didn't do enough sim work coming into this weekend? What was it?
Aston Martin are just shit.
Yep, okay, good.
They realistically are the 6th and 7th best car on the grid at the moment. So.
Best grid on the team.
Best grid, yeah, I mean... Yeah, look, it's not good for them. But every team's going to go to a track where your car doesn't perform as you think it should. This being a new track, I just dare say that their simulator is not up to the specs.
Yeah. Yep.
And the correlation between on track and the simulator isn't close enough, and that's probably why they are that far behind. But it came to a surprise to them. But I mean, 2 races to go with the season that's been a nothing season for them.
Yeah,
it's probably. I mean, they're probably just going to let it go, really.
For sure.
And look at next year. If they've written off this year already, I mean, they'd be looking for Seb to get a couple more top 5s, i.e. Stroll's performance last week. But, not a good look for Aston Martin. They could we've seen what happens when Ferrari stuffs up for a year. Just imagine a team like that stuffing it up for a year and how far they will drop back down the grid if they don't get it right. So Mr. Stroll's investment ain't looking too good at the moment. I mean, his investment in his son hasn't had much return. So
there was a little fire, though, it has to be said, this week at the campus, at the pre-campus building in their wind tunnel.
I reckon that's what it is. They packed up the sim early before they moved it into the campus. They didn't get to use it. It's in a box somewhere.
No, I think they all just evacuated out of the building and no one could actually get in. Maybe, look, who knows? But maybe there was
not a good look.
There was some issues around using the sim with the fire in the wind tunnel that they had. Anyway, no good. But Williams will be very happy with that, especially, as I said, after the passing Frank Williams, they'd be wanting to push closer towards the front. Good for George Russell, though, to be qualifying in 14th and Latifi in 16th. Of course, there's a Ferrari between them and an Alpine in Fernando Alonso in front of them in 13th, which was interesting. VB... in the 375th power unit that he's taken. It's not a brand new one.
Guy.
It's not a brand new one, so it doesn't mean any penalties for him. It's just one from the pool. And then, of course, that went really well, Tommy T, didn't it?
Yeah, geez, it didn't last long. It lasted 2 laps or something. Ridiculous. I don't know what's going on. But what's confusing is how has it all happened to VB and nothing happened to Hamilton reliability-wise? Like, he's taken only a partial engine. He hasn't even taken a full unit, has he? I'm pretty sure he's taken. Yeah. It's insane though how many that VB's had to have in comparison, and I don't know what it is. I think, throwing my tinfoil hat on,
here we go,
that they're making VB take all these. I'm in, Campy. I'm in with you. That they're making VB take all these, and they're just stealing the bits and putting them on Hamilton's car,
there it is.
And then just going, VB, take another engine penalty and get us a new one in the pool. The pool for both of us.
Campy's in the background, just like etching out the serial numbers, just getting rid of them.
Yeah,
FIA
just scratching off VIN numbers and just yeah.
Yeah, the trusty grinder does a hell of a lot, doesn't it?
They'll never know.
All 4 of our listeners have donned their tinfoil hats.
When I always cut down the padlocks on Park Victoria when they lock the gates to my 4-wheel drive tracks. I don't like it. So
Why are you incriminating yourself?
Whatever. Come on, dog.
Heavy. But no, very unlucky for VB. But he pushed through and he ended up on the front row.
Yeah.
So that's a good result.
Well, and he wasn't going to be.
Right.
It was all thanks to Max's error at the end that he was.
Mate, that was some lap from Max, wasn't it? Oh.
Yeah, we'll talk about that
Yeah,
in a moment. That's the end. Let's talk about other things that happened. Carlos Sainz.
Campy wants dessert first.
Yes, Carlos Sainz's spin. No good. It has to be said, it's Charles Leclerc. He ended up qualifying in fourth and he got it together all weekend. Carlos couldn't seem to really get it together. Yeah. The save was good, but of course, Tommy T, he touched his rear wing and it was just. And it seemed to be, wouldn't have mattered if he touched the whole rear of the car or that rear wing end plate because it was the same result. He just couldn't then drive the car.
It seemed like that rear end stability was gone once that had been done because it takes a bit longer than the 5 minutes they had to change a rear wing. So they kind of had to bodge together what they could, strap some tyres on it and send him back out and see what he could do. And in the same complex, he just could not get that rear end to settle down and same situation. Yeah. Unfortunate for him because he looked quick.
Yeah.
He was looking quick. Yeah. He's come alive in the second half of the season and we've been talking about it regularly, but that is a very exciting battle between those two drivers at Ferrari and excited for next year.
Sorry, I think I said before Sainz put it in the wall in practice. It was Leclerc.
It was Leclerc.
So.
That's okay. I didn't want to correct you, but that's fine. Charles,
good correction, Campy.
But Charles,
self-correction.
Yes, well done. Look how far we're coming. Charles, though, going from putting it in the barrier and shaking himself up to qualifying fourth is mega. In terms of, yes, we've said their performance for the rest of this year, this is a good thing. But what this does, though, is it's a joker driver really in the middle of the championship fight because you've got Mercedes, Red Bull, and then a Ferrari in amongst the Red Bulls there too. And obviously the Constructors' Championship for the teams is incredibly important. And Perez needs to really be that rear gunner for Max to try and get anything sorted out from a strategy call, Campy, for the race. But Charles, as we know, he can bloody defend.
He can defend. What's he gonna do? Is he gonna race for himself or is he gonna help someone out? I mean, this is where relationships off track can actually help you. And I think Max probably has the field in him where they don't want Lewis to win again. So could another driver throw some I don't know what the right word is there, but
have you still got your tinfoil hat on?
Well, maybe. Who knows? We'll see.
Send the word then.
No, he's good. He's good. He had a great qualifying results-wise for him. I think that's ultimately where Danny Rick should have been and hoping to be. In comparison to times, especially Danny Rick's Q1 time. But we'll get to that. So, look, good result for Ferrari and you can't hurt it. I mean, but they have struggled at times this weekend. Just think they've got a lack of rear end stability in that car, and I think this is what this track will show you deficiencies in that area.
Yeah, I mean, he starts in 15th, which is, he's in previous races was Portugal or Turkey where he was the only one doing overtakes that managed to get up the field. And he's the kind of driver that can do that, as we said, with F2 showing us where the likely overtaking areas are. That'll be good for them. But yeah, good for Charles. You mentioned DR. He had a cracking Q1. At some point, at somewhere in the track, he's gone over a curb, damaged the floor of the car, and his words were dragging the floor of the car around the circuit, which was costing him tenths. He seemed very, very disappointed. But from McLaren's point of view, whilst Norris qualified in 7th, he qualified on the soft tyre, which is the suboptimal tyre. DR, though, gets absolutely free tyre choice. Campy, when it comes to strategy for McLaren for the race, they're kind of screwed with Norris because he's going to be flailing, I would suggest, in amongst cars who are on the medium tyre around him.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think whether they go medium or hard, McLaren and Danny Rick specifically put a hell of a lot of work in on Friday. Around race pace and strategy. They didn't go for the one-lap things really until they looked at it until until practice 3, I'm sorry. So they will have a lot of data around the hards and the mediums. That's where they set their fastest times on Friday. So I think Danny Rick should go hard and hope for a hope for a yellow sort of around 50 to 60% race completion, so he gets a free pit stop and jumps a hell of a lot of people. I think the McLaren's going to have some pace, a bit like Monza, where they can sit in front of everyone and there'll be a hard car to overtake. Hopefully Norris plays the game a bit. But we'll see what happens. It's going to be exciting, I think. I think this is a race we can get excited about for Danny Rick. He will score points this weekend, unlike the dumb stat that I saw from F1 this week. It said Lando Norris has scored the only 4 points from the last 3 races for McLaren. I was just like, what sort of stat is that? We know what sort of, for your foot's been happening in the F1 and trying to shaft Daniel Ricciardo.
You're doing so well.
Sorry, Jim.
That was a good one at least.
Yeah, it was
35 minutes. Pen and paper out.
Anyway, look, I'm excited. I'm excited for tonight. Danny Rick will go all right. He'll get it right. He'll have a Stroll weekend this weekend from a couple of years ago, where Stroll gets the strategy.
1 in 20.
No, Stroll gets the strategy. Stroll gets the strategy right and gets like a podium. And Danny Rick will get it on merit because he's a superstar.
Hang on a second. Hang on, Campy, hang on. Come over here for a sec.
I'm not comparing Daniel Ricciardo to Stroll.
Sorry, everyone. Just give us a second.
Sounded like
come over here. No. Campy, did you just put Daniel Ricciardo and Lance Stroll in the same sentence?
I did. I'm sorry.
Are you okay?
You did do that.
I didn't mean it like that. I meant that.
We'll go back to everyone now and just tell them you didn't mean it like that. Sorry, listener. What were you saying, Campy?
Danny Rick is a superstar and he will get a podium tonight. Just you wait and see. It's a Danny Rick going. It's a Danny Rick going a weekend. And he's had pace. He's made Lando look dud this weekend, in my opinion, with his pace outright. So, bit of a shame things happen to your floor, but hey, this is motorsport. And we need to build this rivalry up. We need to Lando to get booed like Sebastian Vettel did in 2014 qualifying when he didn't make Q1. So, we need to build this rivalry up.
Thomas Netflix Camp.
Be a good producer. I'd watch.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. Let's talk about Alfa Romeo, though, because Giovinazzi out-qualified DR, and that was the reason is because he didn't have any damage. But at one point or another in Q3, he collected the wall very shortly after Kimi Räikkönen had collected VB, trying to get past him to go back to the pits. It was fin on fin. And on the car that VB's going to. So it was a bit of it like, I think I collected an Alfa Romeo, not like, what the was that guy doing? It's like, no, I'm going there next year, so I probably should be a bit kind.
Whoops.
Tommy T, how did you see it?
Weird, wasn't it? It was weird. It kind of just didn't expect someone to be on a hot lap, I think. And this comes back to that communication from the teams as well, because you don't know what's coming. It is such a blind circuit like that. But yeah, just all of a sudden in the wrong spot and a car was coming along around the outside and wedged between the wall and contact was made. Yeah. Glad that nothing else happened and it was just contact and they kind of seemed to be okay. There wasn't any real lasting damage, but it could have been very bad kind of a couple of seconds sooner or later and like different positions in a corner, and that could have been very, very bad. So thankful it wasn't that. But yeah, I think that's unfortunately one of the things about this track that we're going to see rear its head eventually, like Campy said.
And Giovinazzi, though, in 10th is good for him. Campy, he is going to Formula E next year, and they had testing at Valencia, and he figured out that Formula E has no downforce, and F1 does have downforce, and he went into a corner and was like, oh, hang on, where's the grip? So hopefully at some point Formula E figure that out. But for him, though, last 2 races of the year, we've got to be happy in that top 10 qualifying position.
Yeah, it's a shame that he's moving on. I think he was really hanging out for new regs, and he's one of those drivers that have missed out. I would prefer that with the pushback of regs that every driver got a shot, but hey, I get the sport's got some realities to it. So he'd be happy. He'd be absolutely gutted that he's going to Formula E because, I mean, all forms of electric motorsport suck at the moment. They will get better. Probably.
What a sweeping statement.
Well, James works for Formula E, so he can't tell you what he really thinks. So I can tell you what I actually think about electric motorsport. It will get better. Extreme E, whatever. No, look, the category will get better. And I think I did listen to your podcast with the owner the other day, Jim, and it was very good. It was worth a listen, listeners. What an amazing guy. It was
Alejandro Agag, yes.
Yeah, what an amazing guy.
Talking out
Great,
both sides of your mouth.
great stories.
Come and bow at the temple with me for electric motorsport with Alejandro Agag.
Well, it's anyway.
Yeah,
So, it's a shame. It's a shame for Italian Jesus.
It is, but at least now to put some kind of defense of Formula E, it's classified as a world championship. So you can win a world championship in the same way that it's F1. I know it's not as good, but at least it's kind of going in a direction that is a natural progression for Formula One drivers and F2 drivers. Dan Ticktum, of course, going as well, more so than the Indy path that has been previous. So, look, I mean, Gen 3 is coming for Formula E. Hopefully that, gets better. And I wish Italian Jesus all the best with that. But as I said, good for him to be starting in 10th. Kimi Räikkönen, a couple of races ago, starting in 12th. My favourite any kind of interview that's happened so far this weekend was the pre-race, Tom Clarkson, sitting down with the drivers, of course, and Kimi, and he said, well, Kimi, I know you're not a big fan of the track walk, but it's a long circuit and you've never been here before. And he goes, yeah, even more of a reason why I'm not going to be walking the track.
Kimi. Elite Kimi.
I look like I care.
Good a lot.
It was great. Let's talk, though, about Max, because I'm pretty sure this is the best qualifying lap I think I've ever seen in Formula One, just in terms of the limits that he pushed. And especially, as I said, in that sort of first couple of corners where he kicked up that dust and it just looked like he collected the wall. Campy, let's start with you first and your thoughts, because he's leading the championship at the moment. He has it all to win. This is the race. This is the first time in his career that he can win a World Drivers' Championship in this race. It's depending on what happens, of course, with Lewis Hamilton. Yep. But he was absolutely on it, finding every 10th he possibly could until the last corner, and he just locked that front left up, and he got a bit frustrated and stayed on the power, and unfortunately put it into the wall.
Got a bit greedy. Look, this is why we watch this sport, right? For single, pushing limits. It reminded me a bit of a Monaco DR when he put it on pole in 2016 or whatever it was. Look, absolutely on the limits. The commentary was brilliant. Poetry in motion. It's man at one with machine, and that's why this sport is absolutely phenomenal when these things happen. Interesting, I think, for Red Bull this weekend. I think they know this track's going to be quite hard to pass on. And if you look at Max on Friday and his P1 and P2 sessions, he actually sacrificed a lot of his high fuel load long runs to concentrate on his one lap pace, because I think they see the benefit in getting it on pole. Now for Max, I mean, he was clearly, he's 2.5 tenths up with a sector to go. He wasn't going to lose that time. He would have had it on pole and it would have put him right in the right where he wanted to be for this race and for his championship moving forward. Unfortunately, these are the sorts of things that are going to decide this championship. Millimeters, decisions, brake lockups and stuff like that. And the way Lewis is driving at the moment, it's going to be, Lewis could be leading the championship tomorrow after we leave this race, and then it's who beats who next weekend. So, for Max, he has to finish a minimum of P2. Do I think he can get it off the start? Probably not. I think Lewis is too composed and on a tear at the moment, but geez, Max is driving well, isn't he?
He is, and
he has to throw everything at it in order to get it done.
Absolutely, he bloody does, and he bloody is driving at the absolute limit. Tommy T, of course, we don't know yet, but potential issue with what he's done is gearbox damage. Now that will mean a 5-place grid penalty if that was to occur. I hope it doesn't come to that. Like it's enough of what it was, braking suspension and everything else. You could tell who the emotions on the pit wall, and even Jos Verstappen in the background going Toto Wolff. Yeah, you'll smash. It's good to watch, because this is a once in a decade kind of championship fight. I think we've said, in the last couple of episodes, and we want these guys to be pushing it to the limit. It looked like Lewis was not pushing to the limit as much as Max was, because he'd rather just see the car okay through to second or third position, whereas Max is like, nah, all or nothing.
Yeah, we haven't seen this like all or nothing Max in a long time in qualifying, have we? I think it was back to Monaco. I don't think it was even qualifying, wasn't it? Wasn't it practice 3 or something? But he rode his car off enough to kind of rule himself out. Yep.
And so, Campy, of course, when it comes down to experience, Lewis has been here before, of course. He is well and truly versed in winning title championships. This is Max's first attempt. Of course, there's plenty more to come for Max, isn't there? This is the trajectory that he's on. But in terms of how this emotionally affects a driver, how do you think it plays out for Max? We know he's a professional, but it's got to be in his mind somewhere that, he's made that error.
Look, we know Max drives with a certain level of composure, right? And he doesn't seem to be flustered too much. If you go back to the 2016 season that Tommy was alluding to when he made some mistakes, he made sort of 7 mistakes in 7 races. And he came out after that and said, I didn't change my driving style. I know what I'm capable of, and it just so happened that things happened back then. I didn't need to change and adapt. So we know he drives with this confidence in himself. But when a world championship is on the line, and this could be the race where he could secure it if things go his way, the pressure is on. I don't think he was feeling pressure at all about having a crash last night. I think when you're absolutely on the limit, those are the things that happen. Will he be thinking about it afterwards? Probably. Next week, he'll probably go into his head, geez, 3 races ago, I had a 20-point lead and it's mine to lose, and Lewis is possibly could win 4 in a row. So, that'll start to play on him next weekend, I think, if he has to beat Lewis. But it will be interesting to see. It will be playing on him, and it'll be the first time in a very, very long time where he'll be feeling some internal pressure, put on himself because it's a World Drivers' Championship. Lewis, how many times has he done it? He's been in the position where he's lost them in his first year, really close. And he's lost one to Nico as well that he probably should have won in hindsight, in his view. But he's won 7 going for his 8. So he's been here before. He knows how to deal with it. And look at how he's driving at the moment. He's doing absolutely everything right to get the results he needs. So,
yeah, I completely agree with you. And I mean, as you say, like in terms of Lewis's experience, let's not forget that 10 minutes before qualifying started, he was in the stewards' room talking to them rather than prepping for qualifying. And his first lap was pretty rubbish, but then he got it together. So certainly a lot of experience there. But geez, it's blood. This is what we want. This is all the way to the end. And little things like this really, as Tommy T would say, throw some jeopardy in it. And we have lost Tommy T, by the way. He will be back for the race review tomorrow. The race starting grid, here we go. It's Hamilton in first, Bottas second, Verstappen third, Leclerc fourth, Perez fifth, Gasly sixth. Now, AlphaTauri, he's very good at being here. I know he's in the bin, but Tsunoda in eighth. This is another good outing for AlphaTauri. Both of them on the medium stripe tyre with Norris in seventh on the soft tyre. Now, Pierre Gasly, I think, is one of those drivers that is also able to keep people behind him, but also sort of disappears into no man's land a bit campy and hangs out there for most of the race. Is Lando really going to have any chance of challenging him?
Is Lando going to challenge him? Absolutely, Lando will challenge him. Lando should jump both AlphaTauris. No, he's got Yuki behind him. So
behind him, yep.
Hey, good for Yuki. This is the 4th race in a row he's been in the top 10, so good results. He's tracking in the right direction. Gasly's doing well, but I think Yuki at one stage was like P2 in qualifying after the first runs in Q1. So, hey, he's driving with a level of, the difference between his best and his worst is a big gap, unlike Pierre, where, consistency in the difference between his best and his worst is a lot smaller. So that's where those two are at the moment. But hey, good for Yuki. If he can, if they've got some race pace here, which it could be an interesting track, could be a bit like Monza where we don't see a lot of passing. And I think they're where the characteristics sit. So a bit of strategy will come into play depending on what happens off the start, those sorts of things. But hey, all credit to AlphaTauri. They are genuinely the last 4 races, I'm seriously considering them a sister team. Yep. Not so much a junior team anymore. They are performing well above where we expected them to be. And hopefully they can transfer that to next year too.
Yeah, absolutely right. I completely agree, and it's good to see Ocon in 9th, Giovinazzi in 10th, 11th, DR, 12th, Raikkonen, 13th, Alonso. Now for Alpine, a great outing last time in Qatar, and 3rd and 5th for them. But so far back down the pack this time around, I mean, they're obviously not going to be totally stoked with it. Obviously faster than Aston Martin. But when it comes to the championship fight for that position, them and AlphaTauri are the sort of going head to head all year this year. Is kind of if Tsunoda and Gasly can get some results, then potentially they can claw that back.
Yeah, I think Alpine have enough of a gap now to cement that. What is it, 6th place in the championship? So they'll be right. They looked good Friday, Alpine. They looked really quick, and I think Fernando was up and about again. But for them to qualify the way they did, not ideal. I think they had a bit of a after qualifying. I think they had a bit of a Aston Martin type of weekend. They expected a hell of a lot more than what they actually got. So yeah, a bit of a shame for Alonso. Couldn't care less about Ocon, but that's where it is. So.
I'm with you. George Russell 14th, Carlos Sainz 15th, Nick Latifi 16th, Seb and Stroll in 17th and 18th, and Mick Schumacher out-qualifying Mazepin again in 19th to 20th. Well, that's the grid.
How far off the pace was Mazepin?
There's a couple of seconds behind when it came to the end. But in terms of distance between him and his teammate, I don't know. I think it was maybe half a second from memory.
Okay.
I'm not sure it was terrible compared to the front.
Yeah.
But the Haas we don't expect to do anything better.
Needs to be better than that. And we're with a whole season in F1, you can't be that bad.
It's be interesting to see how it plays out.
It was a whole second. It was
a whole second.
Second.
Well, there you go. That's not good. That's no good at all.
That's no good. Not when you've had 22, 21 qualifying in that car now, and you should be doing better, 22. So
and you get the same, exactly the same amount of races as your teammate in an F1 car. So but Schumacher just clearly the better driver at this point.
Yes, absolutely.
We'll see what happens later on, of course. But let's see what we're going to watch for in the race, Campy. Of course, this gearbox issue, as I said, there's a potential issue for Max if they decide to change it to be safer rather than sorry. There'll be a 5-place grid penalty for him, which will send him tumbling down the order behind some cars, which will be very difficult for him to get past. Not impossible for Max Verstappen, just difficult. And with this being, as I said earlier, the first race that he can ever win in his entire F1 career, a World Drivers' Championship, I mean, it's all to play for him. What does he do from the start? He needs to jump Valtteri Bottas very quickly, doesn't he?
He does. I don't think he'll have an issue with his gearbox. I think that touch was it was there, and it made a difference for his qualifying lap, but I don't think that wasn't anywhere near gearbox territory, in my opinion, the way they're built these days. So he'll be fine for that. For the race, he needs to start. He needs to get into at least P2. But, we have seen him make bad starts at times, and if he gets swallowed up, this isn't going to be a track like the Red Bull Ring where he can come back through. They have strapped a bit more downforce onto the car, so that'll help into braking, into big braking after a long straight. So, yeah, I'd expect him to hold his position because I think Bottas is on a bit of a tear as well. So, I think the top three will be Hamilton, Bottas, Verstappen off the start, and it'll probably stay there. And if Bottas can hold him up and protect Hamilton, I think that's what will probably happen, in my opinion.
It's a big weekend for the second drivers. VB and Perez need to understand the assignment of they're doing everything to get as many points as they can and to keep that other team behind them. VB, though, in a much better position than Sergio to do that. When it comes to this sort of second drivers' championship, I suppose, in your mind, Valtteri, is he better than Sergio's performed better than Sergio all year?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's been some horrible races for the two of them, but VB has been better than Perez throughout the year, and that's why Mercedes will win the Constructors' Championship, because he's consistently there or thereabouts. I mean, I want Perez starting in 8th, 9th, where he has previously. I mean, he's starting in 5th tonight, so he's got to do some work off the line to get where he needs to be, but they really need to be splitting those Mercedes to have any sort of, to force Mercedes' hand to pit early or pit late, get an undercut, those sort of things. So,
absolutely right. All right, well, That's all to come, of course.
Yes.
You can join along if you want to get up at 4:30 in the morning, along with us here on the eastern coast of Australia to watch the race. The three of us will be up. We'll be recording an episode right after the race, which means for your morning, hopefully commute, you will be able to listen to our race review. But it's been great to have you here.
Probably have
Thank
a chat
you so
about
much.
Bathurst too. That's on today.
Well, we're going to settle into a bit of Bathurst watching. It's the only V8 supercar race I'll watch all year, and I'll join the rest of the country that goes, oh, is there V8 supercars this year? Okay, we'll just watch that one race and not care about anything else. But it's going to be good. In terms of what you can do to help support this podcast, well, the simple thing is to listen, tell some friends, subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening, and if you are on Apple Podcasts, we really appreciate ratings and reviews. We've got some reviews to read out tomorrow morning as well. Campy, a massive thank you to you. Tommy T, you've disappeared into the ether, but a massive thank you to you. We will chat tomorrow morning.
We will.
After the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Yes, please no.
That princess will be like, can you go do my dry cleaning? I'll be like, mate, dry clean your own shit.
How often do you think I dry clean stuff? Oh,
Just me and Tommy sabotaging you.
what a nightmare. Thing is, I wouldn't invite you along. You'd just appear somehow. You just know where Extreme is. Like, go and work for some random catering company, get the contract, and then appear and be like, not again.